Hey everyone, today we're going to take apart the Aya Neo. We already have a review on this device, but this is the teardown. It's an interesting handheld. It's basically a mini gaming PC, but the company wants to eventually take this in the direction of an independent console. For now though, it's a Windows-based, it's just Windows 10. It's got a Ryzen 4500U on it, and this is the Founders Edition model. So there are a few changes between this and the final, but this is pretty close to final, and a lot of people are going to get it. And so today we're going to take this handheld console apart. Before that, this video is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is what we've been using for years to manage our own Gamers Nexus store, and we've been incredibly happy with the choice. Squarespace makes e-commerce easy for those interested in starting stores, but it also has powerful tools to build all types of websites. Photo galleries for photographers, resume and portfolio sites, and small business sites are all easily done through Squarespace. Having built a lot of client websites the old way before running GN full-time, we can easily recommend Squarespace as a powerful, fast solution. Go to squarespace.com/gamersnexus to get 10% off your first purchase with Squarespace. So this is the device. We did a full review of it in the other video. It's genuinely really interesting. Not going to go over a lot of the basics of it, how it feels from a user experience, anything like that. We're just interested in this video on the internals. It is quite a bit different from the Nintendo Switch. Again, already discussed in the other video, but just size alone, I've got the screens lined up so that they're both level. And you can see the thickness of the Aya Neo is significant here, which is made obvious by the weight difference too. So this thing, most of its mass is going to be in the battery, which is here, and the heatsink, which is over here. And it's actually really helpful that this particular model is clear. They will eventually be at least just a black plastic. Not sure if they're doing multicolors, but this was what they called the Founders Edition. Helpful for us though, because we can see where the screws are placed and where everything is located. This design is the one that was done by Whizman Design, the partner with Aya and Uncle A as he's known. So for exterior basics, just looking at the design, it's basic stuff like the specs. So it says 6 cores here, it says 30 watt. Not really sure we can verify that, but copper piping heatsink, it says. It talks, actually full credit to them, they've got some, it looks like completely accurate specs over here, down to getting the language correct of bus versus protocol. That's not commonly, that's a Patrick Stone specialty, is the protocol versus bus nomenclature. But interesting stuff to put on the design and technically accurate, so that's kind of a nice upside to it. These holes for the fan are actually extremely obstructive. They've got their logo emblazoned right in the middle. Now, to be fair, that's where the hub is, but depending on the spacing of the hub to the plastic, it could still be useful intake area. This amount of plastic, though, for the grill is unfortunately going to be naturally obstructive to intake, but we talked about that. The thermals weren't too bad in the review. It just kind of depends on how it's situated. For exhaust, it looks like an exhaust option up here. This is, again, pretty obstructive. The plastic's really thick here, so the hole to plastic ratio is suboptimal. But we do have a couple of USB ports on the top. There's headphone jack, some buttons, and all the other buttons that we talked about in the review. Internally, once we start taking it apart, we're going to discover that there's the speaker 1 and 2 down here. There's a small cable here that's just power and ground going to the speaker. Another cable here, power and ground, so we'll have to be careful of those. I wish all things were clear when I take them apart the first time, because this makes it really easy to see where all the danger zones are. Like over here, this ribbon cable is definitely in a bit of a danger zone because it looks like it might be soldered onto one of the PCBs in there, and then the PCB for the controller is actually physically separate from the motherboard, so we're going to get into that too. But enough of that. Let's start actually taking it apart. I have not disassembled this yet, but I do know it's going to technically void their warranty by their definition of it. That's okay though. It looks like 1, 2, 6, maybe somewhere in the range of 12 or 13, maybe 14 screws in the back, something like that. So we're going to use the new GN mod mat for this. I've got some screw tracking over here and then on the grid to my right as well. So we have plenty of options to keep track of things if the screw size changes. And we're going to be using our toolkit, all of this on store.gamersnexus.net if you're interested in any of it. The new mod mat that I'm working on sold out within a week, and it was the highest order volume ever, but we have it on back order if you want to guarantee you get one next time. So important disclaimer here, these screws, if you ever take one of these apart or anything with screws this specific size, these used to be really common in a lot of the NVIDIA Founders models. They've kind of lost popularity, but extremely easy to strip. You really got to make sure the driver is actually seated before you start turning, because you only get a couple spins without being socketed before they strip, so just be careful about that. We've got two that are marked with M's, so they are tamper seals. Unfortunately, with screws this size, that makes it a lot harder to get them out, so we'll come back to those last. It also feels pretty bad to apply pressure to this thing like this. It's not exactly a stable surface. It's not a stable surface to screw on, I guess, but they are coming out. We're gonna get these tamper seals out. Normally I just go through them, but the actual Phillips head's so small, I'm worried they're just gonna jam it up. Okay, one left. The last one's the one I'm kind of nervous about, because it just doesn't grab at all. Oh, there it is. Grabs a little bit there. I've actually turned it on. Well, we are going to have to disconnect the battery immediately because of things like this. Okay. I think that's all of them. So we ended up with 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 screws. I don't think I'm missing any. No plastic snaps. That's kind of nice. Oh, there's one down there. But otherwise, it's an encounter on the side. Okay, so the buttons are... Oh, there's a screw. I found one. There's a screw hiding right there. Actually, a very important one, because the shell will crack if you don't take it out. So I caught it right before I started prying. That is actually a different size screw. Check that thing out. Look how tiny that is. It's like, looks like a speck of dust. So that we're gonna be careful with. Actually, I'm gonna stick it to a magnet just to be extra sure it doesn't fall on the floor. Oh, well, that was violent. Cool, okay, good. No damage. So there's the back of the shell. It looks pretty cool. I like the clear design. All right, so first thing we're gonna do is disconnect the battery, which is entangled in speaker wires. Okay, cool. All right, battery's disconnected, so there's no more risk of shorting anything. So here's the internal setup. Battery's disconnected, and it looks like it might be glued into place. We'll try to get that out in a second. So for cooling, there's a fan that looks to be about, they actually printed on their chassis, they say 75 millimeters. Let's double check. Trust but verify. Wait, did they say 75 millimeters? That's not 75 millimeters. Low speed fan, diameter 75 millimeters. Thickness 6 millimeters. RPM 4400. Let's do it this way. Does that say 75? It says 40, doesn't it? Does it say 40?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Where does 75 come from? Is it this? That's not going to be 75. Is it this? No, that's... Where's 75?
The whole width of the whole shroud.
There it is. So as we all know, it's the fan is 75 millimeters. All right, well, so the shell, I said trust but verify, but let's just verify only going forward. I think we've trusted enough now. This is the heatsink. That is copper, I believe, internally. I don't know if the fins are copper. Nope, those are aluminum. Aluminum fins, copper underneath for, it looks like, either heat pipes or a cold plate. We'll see soon. And standard design for a laptop, air comes in here. Air gets pushed through the fins, so there's a bunch of fins here that dice that way, and then the air comes out the back as your cooling solution. I'm not sure where to go next, so let's just start with stuff that looks obvious and do the SSD. Where'd it go? Where did it go? Oh, okay. Why this is coded... I guess maybe that's meant to be a heat spreader. That is a thing they do on SSDs sometimes. I see some copper foil. So I'm actually going to leave this alone, but we'll peel off enough to show what I'm talking about. So let's get this over here. You can actually see a copper foil in there. This is something maybe people can, something to learn about, useful for PCs too. So that copper foil, I mean, it's technically a heat sink, a heat spreader anyway. And heat spreaders like this, foils, you know, they're not effective for something like a CPU, but when you're putting it on NAND and a controller, the controller is the part that cares. The flash actually doesn't care about the heat. But when you put it on a controller, it will help spread some of that heat, provided there's an interface connecting them. So that might be a thermal adhesive, it could be a thermal paste, it could be a thermal pad. So there's going to be an interface in there. You can actually see where it's bumping up. And that will help spread the heat a little bit. So it helps. It's a cheap solution, but not a bad solution for something like this. You're not doing a lot of I/O intensive tasks on this anyway. There's wireless right there. We learned in our Intel NUC teardown that these are dangerous to disconnect antenna from, these Intel ones, because the female snap will come out with the male stud when you pull the antenna, and then you have to tape it back into place. So I'm going to leave those alone if I can. Let's get the fan. Some of these wires are kind of haphazard. So, I mean, it's not bad. Like, they're doing okay for, it's a small company. I'm trying to keep that in mind. So it's not like a mega manufacturing operation. But stuff like this, I don't like these loose wires hanging around. There's a little bit of a hazard when, not like in terms of personal safety, but in terms of damaging the product when you are maintaining it or opening it. So that came out pretty easily. There's the model number if you end up needing to replace it. 0.45 amps, 5 volts actually, pretty low voltage. This is where it gets kind of interesting. So there is memory soldered to the board. Let me read what this is. This is the SK Hynix memory that Patrick wrote about in his script in the review. So we've got 4 modules soldered right there. Not sure if there's any others up here, but I think it was 4 times 4 gigabyte modules, if I remember correctly in the review. And because this is an APU, all the memory is going to transact from the same place. So system and GPU memory are coming from the same place. Or at least from soldered chips on the board, if not those exact ones. Really curious about the cooling solution. Let's see. So one thing I like to do on devices that I've never worked on before is try to tighten the screws a little bit first. And that's so that I know where they stopped torquing them when they did the install. Because when you reinstall this stuff later, you don't want to over torque it and crack the die. That would suck. So normally check what kind of tension they had. They fully tightened these. Glue. Oh, funny. There's a little bit of Captain tape that came out with it. Oh yeah, there's Captain tape underneath there. That's, well, we'll find out what that is in a second. Ooh. I think I felt a lot of thermal paste. Ooh, okay. Trigger warning for certain commenters in our audience. I mean, this doesn't bother me. I look at stuff like this all the time, but for those of you who are sensitive, that is a healthy amount of thermal paste. There's nothing wrong with this. Excess will pretty much only squish out to the sides, which is precisely what it's done here. So typically in a massive operation like NVIDIA's, AMD's, Intel's, you're not going to see paste bleed over onto this. I don't actually know the technical name of this. I need to ask someone. But basically, I always call it like a retention or just a bracket for the substrate. But you won't typically see it bleed over here. Doesn't matter. That's fine. It's not hurting anything. It is amusing though. Generally, there's not a downside for more paste. So later, when I reseal this, I will probably use one of these small tubes, and just, I think, if we just kind of, the correct method is to put your whole body weight into the plunger, empty the tube onto the silicon, and then when you put the heatsink back on, the thermal paste will spread over the whole motherboard. Don't do that. It's a waste of thermal paste. All right. So, small thermal pad over here. It looks like 1/2 mil for that thermal pad. That's what we're dealing with on there. So the memory, was the memory not contacting anything? It's like this, right? So there's actually no cooling on the memory. Let me take a look. Is any of it?
Yeah, because he pointed it out before he took it off.
Yeah. Well, okay. So maybe a little bit of turbulent air is coming out through the bottom of that and hitting the memory, but there's not a lot of memory cooling going on here. It's not running at I mean, the GPU and the CPU aren't running at particularly high power. So maybe that's okay, but the memory could probably use some cooling, honestly. For the rest of it, so they've got the inductors heat sinked into this copper plate, and that copper cold plate is sharing the APU copper cold plate, which is sinking into two, I think those are 6 mil heat pipes. 6 or 8, let's see. Might be wrong. 2 8 mil heat pipes. And then those come out here and just split both directions. And then you've got the heat pipe welded to the fin stack, which is, I was actually wrong. I think I was wrong about this. Not sure. Pretty sure I was wrong about this. It looks like it's a copper fin stack, unless it's just copper plated, which is a thing I've seen in products like this before. It all looks copper. The only thing I'm uncertain about is I see some white specks through the top here where there's some missing paint. No, that's copper. Okay, cool. So, small copper fin stack. How is this secure? I see screws. Okay, so the controller PCBs, this is a remnant. I think this is an artifact from when there was a schism in the team wanted to do separable, like Joy-Cons basically, and the team that proceeded forward did not want to do that for undisclosed legal reasons. Can't really. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not sure what legal reasons there would be, but anyway, so this is what they ended up with. But I think the separate PCBs is probably an artifact of that design stage where they were trying to make it separable. Really fragile cable here for the buttons, bumper and trigger. Really fragile ribbon cable connecting data and power for the two PCBs. This is the rumble down here, that really violent rumble that we talked about. That is emanating from these two devices, one on each side. And you can see they're actually not that damped. A lot of controllers we've taken apart in the past, they'll have a lot more foam around them, and that's not here. So you get a lot more like violent rumble, which is plastic on rumble pack, more so than the rumble getting, or the vibration getting sent through foam blocks into the plastic. See some solder marks on the board. Not that it really matters, but a little bit of manual work happening there. Hot glue, so we have in fact found glue. So rumble is soldered into a contact on the PCB and then glued over to keep it in place. On both sides, less glue on this side. These are normally kind of hard to get back in because now I'm going to have to deal with a bunch of ribbon cables, and those suck and they break a lot. But we can work with it in a way where they'll be fine. But I'm curious what's on the other side of this. It should just be the screen. There's a lot of small things that are going to want to break here. This is the speaker, this cable right here. But I'm going to try and leave that one alone. Oh, I'm stuck on the other side, I think. Oh, yeah, that's kind of sucky. Oh, hopefully that does not require being re-secured. Okay, that's going to be the end of the journey here. So the monitor, the display cable is on the opposite side of this, and it's pulling on it. So we're not going to be able to get that up. I mean, I could, but I'm not sure I'd be able to reconnect it. It looks mostly taped in place, and then I think it's maybe secured in a connector that closes. We're gonna leave that alone because that's just not really worth it. Let me just look down there and see if there's. Oh, there's nothing to see anyway. I don't know if we're gonna be able to show that.
You can tilt it down slightly.
Like that. So it's pretty much just a black backside. It's not, it's a plastic or a sheet coating, probably to prevent a direct short. So that's all that's going on in there. And then other than that, there's some plastic tooling to hold everything in place. Not a lot to see though. Okay. I think that's pretty much going to be it. It's pretty simple. This is not difficult to replace like the SSD on if you wanted to do that. And nothing else is super user serviceable, but these technically are, the controllers are. But I think if they do sell standalone controller boards, I'm assuming the Rumble pack comes with it. If it doesn't, you would have to desolder it here and then resolder it onto the new one. Hot glue is optional if you want it to be true to the original, but otherwise it's not too hard to get into. The heatsink, there's not a lot they can do. I would say the biggest places for optimization would be all this plastic. There's too much thick plastic in there, So it is a little bit constricted. But otherwise, I'd say they've done an impressive job for a company that's new to this, and for a company that is somewhat alone in the space of handheld Windows systems, aside from GPD systems. So there's not a lot out there, and this design is better than I expected. So that's it for the teardown. Like I said, the design is better than I expected. Now, that's not an endorsement of the product as a whole. The review is what you need to go to determine whether or not you actually want to buy the thing. It's pretty heavy. The rumble's aggressive. There's some screen issues. The practicality is debatable in a lot of instances, but there are upsides, and that's all in the review. So check that out. From an assembly standpoint, it is honestly better than I thought it would be, and I think that's probably because Aya is not a big enough group to do all of the evil keep people out things that large manufacturers of consoles do, like using game bits and whatever the flower-shaped screwdriver head is called that Apple uses. I think it starts with an S. Doesn't matter. They're stupid. So they're maybe not big enough to do those evil things, but that makes the disassembly much easier, and the use of space is there's not much else you could do other than maybe some heat sinking on the memory. I think that would be my number one concern, is if that becomes a thermal issue at some point, but we didn't test for that in this one. So that's it. Thanks for watching. As always, subscribe for more. You can go to store.gamersnexus.net if you'd like to grab one of our mod mats, or you can go to patreon.com/gamersnexus for extra behind-the-scenes videos. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you all next time.